Hello, dear viewer. This is a new and equally exciting story, but before it starts, I want to mention that only 20% are subscribed to our channel. I think if you care about someone's creativity, you will not be difficult to click this red button and put a like on this video. It is very much motivates me to voice new stories. Thank you. Here we go. The Most Loving Story, Chapter 1. I realized there was going to be trouble when they walked into the bar. Not physical when someone gets their ass kicked, but emotional when I don't want to hear that shit. Up until a few months ago, I considered them friends. Even when everything went to hell, if they'd just kept their mouths shut, everything would have been fine. The ones who I found out knew about her cheating, I dropped like a stone, making it clear that they were no longer my friends. Sure, they tried to argue, didn't want to take sides, hoped she would understand that it was destructive behavior, that she still loved you, blah blah blah. But it didn't work with me, and I told them so. It took a couple of meetings and some pretty intense confrontations before they realized I was serious. To this day, if one of them comes up and tries to talk, I either turn away or walk away. I think they finally figured it out. The few people I still talk to realized what it was about and tried not to mention it. If they happened to mention it, I simply excused myself and left. 6 months had passed, papers had been filed, depositions had been taken. My 50-50 split offer was more than fair, and everything was almost ready. She fought it to the last minute. We tried arbitration, but they gave up when neither of us would budge. They basically talked to her, trying to convince her that she was getting a really good deal. Then she offered me counseling. I declined, telling the judge it would be a waste of time and money because there was no way I would reconcile. The judge, after listening to an emotional, borderline hysterical Becky, threatened me with jail and was shocked when I said it was okay. Just tell me when to turn myself in. Are you so sure that this marriage can't be saved? Without a shadow of a doubt, just so you understand. I will emphasize this. I will not live with her or have a relationship with her for the rest of my life. We have no children together. We have very few mutual friends left since this all started. My business partner and his wife helped her continue and cover up the affair, so I am done with them. Divorcing her will only be a small ripple in the big pond of life. Is that clear enough for you? Perhaps I was overreacting and she decided to test my resolve. I spent 3 weekends in jail before she finally realized that I was willing to go on indefinitely and refused counseling. They were on a mission. It was evident in the eyes of the women. The men just looked uncomfortable. I knew they didn't get there by accident. The bar was in another city, 25 miles away. I told my new favorite bartender that I wasn't satisfied with the quality of people at my old bar. She was quite perceptive in her early 40s, and she saw almost everything. She managed to get the story out of me bit by bit, usually waiting until I'd had at least 4 beers. She'd been married to the same man for 21 years. They owned a bar. What I liked best about her was that she never spoke her mind, even though I could see she wanted to. Finally, one night I told her to speak up, once and never again, to stop thinking about it. When we were done, she just stared at me for a while. Obviously, I've only heard your side of the story. It may be fantasy and delusion, but I don't think so. You may have been right to walk away, but you may want to give her the opportunity to tell you her version of events. I'm sure you've wondered how it all went down. Maybe this will be good for you, or maybe it won't, and it'll make you even angrier. Nevertheless, human nature being what it is, perhaps it will help you to listen to it. It's up to you. End of discussion. Next beer's on me. God, I loved that woman. A motherly figure who would feed you any kind of alcohol for a fee if you gave her your keys first. She realized something was wrong as soon as they walked in and saw my face go stone cold. Friends? She said, nodding in their direction. I don't know, I answered honestly. I guess I'm about to find out. Don't do anything stupid, she warned. Just look at me, and I'll chase them out of here. It took them 10 minutes to work up the courage to say anything. Todd came over and stood next to me. Hey Jace, how's it going? I'm fine. The family is fine. Everyone's fine. Let's cut to the chase, Todd. What do you want? My little speech, delivered without emotion, shook him a little. Me and the guys, he nodded at his 2 friends. We don't really want to do this. But Becky made them cry over what an asshole you are for something she regrets, and you won't forgive her. You remember you were married? Hell, technically you're still married, and they don't want to put up with that. So, we figured out where you were, and here we are. Will you talk to them? If I say no, tell them to shove Becky up their asses and leave me alone." He blushed a little, but continued. "It'll probably hurt all their feelings and they'll still come after you. Please, Jace." I left him for a minute. "Okay, but remember what I said to Jeff and Angela? To Bob and Gloria? That still stands. I'll do it, and we'll be done. Don't come looking for me again, understand?" I think he got a little pissed off, like I didn't care. "I understand. Man, what a hard ass you've turned into. Now, will you talk to them?" "Yes. Let me ask you something before you go. If it were your wife, would you leave it at that?" He smirked. "That's never going to happen. She loves me." "Yes. Becky used to say the same thing, and still does. But that didn't stop her now, did it?" He frowned before I continued. "First give my words to Sandy and George, and then have them come here and tell me they understand me. They may not be as stultified as you are. Then tell the girls I'll give them 10 minutes, no more, so they'd better be sure of their words right away, because they won't get a second chance. I think I'll have time to enjoy another beer by then." I turned away, dismissing him. He stood for a second, hanging his head, and returned to the table. I watched in the mirror as they raised their heads and began to discuss each other heatedly. Sandy threw up his hands and walked over to me. "I've always liked you, Jace. You don't deserve this shit. I'm a little embarrassed about all this, and I'm leaving. I apologize for bothering you, but Tina is determined. We're gonna have a long talk on the way home. This is the last time I'll tolerate her interference. I guess this is goodbye." He held out his hand. I shook it. "Bye, Sandy. You're one of the good ones. If I ever come back to town, I might look you up. Just not Tina." George never really liked me, so he didn't have a problem with it. The women watched me like hawks. I made them wait a while before mentally girding myself and entering the lion's den. I sat down and they started talking. I raised my hand, pulled out my phone, and set the timer for 10 minutes. I could see that this made them very angry. "Okay, you're on the clock. Go ahead." Tina rolled her eyes. "Really, Jace? A timer?" 9 minutes and 49 seconds, I said. They talked among themselves for a minute, then realized their mistake and looked at Carrie. Obviously, she was supposed to be the spokesperson. "I know it's none of our business, but..." They almost ran away when I slammed my hand sharply on the table. "Finally, at least someone understands. You're right. It's none of your fucking business, and you'd better stay out of it. But you can't fight back, can you? You decided to reason with me because you're our friends, right? Then where the hell were you when she was spending her evenings with someone else? Where was your concern for me then? One word from either of you to either of us would have put me out of a lot of misery. We wouldn't even be here now. But looking back, I can't recall you or any of our so-called friends giving it up. Hell, a lot of you gave her an alibi. Fuck that. Fuck that. Fuck you. End of rant. Let me reset the timer." Everyone sat stunned until Carrie spoke. She sounded annoyed. "Jace, please, this was a mistake. She didn't mean for it to happen. We didn't know what to say. She's miserable. Her parents hardly talk to her. Her boss put her on probation. She cried when she found out you saved her job. I think she's learned her lesson. It's time to swallow your stubborn pride and take her back." I rolled my eyes. "Time? I'm sorry. I haven't read The Handbook of Cheating Whore Wives. I didn't realize there was a time limit on how long I was allowed to be angry. So it's okay now? A kiss, a promise, and we'll live happily ever after?" "I don't think so. You know, I'd be a lot calmer if you people weren't shoving it in my face. Do you still think you know what's best for us?" They looked a little guilty before nodding in agreement. "You all think so?" I looked around the table, and everyone nodded their heads again. They mumbled for a few more seconds before I stopped them. "Hold on. Let's digress for a second. Carrie, if you found out George was screwing around with you, and we all knew and didn't tell you, would that be okay? Or if the spouses found out, they'd eventually be forgiven. Do you love him that much?" She frowned, but said she would do it eventually. "What if the person he was socializing with was an acquaintance of yours, a friend, even married to a girlfriend? Would you be able to forgive him as well?" She looked visibly uncomfortable. They were all suddenly very nervous. I'd like to think that after a while I would, if I thought they were really sorry. I grinned. That's great because Ian and George have been fucking like monkeys for about 8 months now. In fact, when word got out about you two, I didn't believe it. And before you ask, I was going to tell you what I heard, but other things came up that needed my attention. I left it at that, because I thought you deserved to find out for yourself as much as I did. By then, I didn't care about any of you. That's why I moved here. I heard they have the best class of assholes. So, take your pompous, hypocritical platitudes and shove them up your ass. I stopped, breathing heavily. There was dead silence at the table. So, let the healing begin. That way we can all get through this. Carrie, tell Jen you forgive her. Jen, in 4 months you can promise her that you won't spend any more evenings with him and everything will be fine. Your marriage will be stronger. I'm sure it's written in one of the chapters of the cheating manual. I stopped to catch my breath. Let's get Todd and George in here and do some blanket healing. And Carrie, don't throw too many rocks or I'll have to tell an interesting story about you and the stripper during your last girls' weekend in Myrtle Beach. Did I mention Becky told stories when she was drunk and we were alone? Tina, you and Sandy need a new circle of friends. Looks like the old one's worn out. We're done talking about Becky and me, but it sounds like you have a lot to talk about, so I'm leaving. Let's not repeat ourselves. Ever. Bye. Was it a shitty thing to do? Maybe, but it didn't bother me too much. He's without sin, etc. A real fight broke out at the table. There was a lot of yelling, crying, and more than a few slaps. Sandy grabbed Tina and they moved to another table. He kept his voice down, but he was pointing his finger in her face and she was crying hard. Finally, Marge, the bartender, told them to either leave or tone it down. They left, all except Tina and Sandy. She timidly approached me. I'm sorry, she said, lowering her head and avoiding eye contact. Then she gathered her courage and looked up. We just thought you were the best of us. You seemed really happy. I couldn't believe it when you broke up, so I figured that when you calmed down, you'd talk things out and get back together. I think everyone, especially Becky, didn't expect your reaction. You're really over her, aren't you? Yes, Tina, that's true. But you're wrong. You and Sandy are the best of us. Use this as a learning experience. Choose your friends more carefully in the future. For now, go home. Love each other. And if nothing else, remember me and Becky, and that you can never be sure of anything, especially how a person will react to betrayal. Maybe we'll see each other again someday. Sandy apologized again, and they left holding hands. Marge nodded at them as they left. They seem like a decent couple. I'm not so sure about the others. I think the divorce court in your hometown is about to get a little busier. I nodded in agreement. Then I handed her the keys, $30 for the cab, and turned my attention to the whiskey. I was as surprised by my reaction as everyone else. I like to think I was a pretty decent guy, I still do, but you never know how a person will react to stress and betrayal. The fact that I loved her so much made the betrayal even worse. I wasn't attracted to Becky at first. She flirted too much and seemed a little flighty. We didn't see each other for the first 2 years I knew her. She was best friends with my business partner's wife. Cindy was the one who kept trying to get us together. Give me a break, CYN. We're just not attracted to each other. Speak for yourself. I know for a fact she's interested in you. You'd be a good fit for her. Being half drunk, I smiled and kissed her cheek. But, dear CYN, will it fit me? She left it for about 6 months, and then Alan, my partner, asked me for a favor. Jace, I hate to burden you this late, but all of us, CYN, Becky, and her date, we're going to the theater tomorrow. Mamma Mia's touring troupe. I know how much you love musicals, you recluse, and Beck and her boyfriend had a big fight and broke up. Could you come with us and keep her company? I thought for a moment. I don't think so, Al. I don't think I'd enjoy the company of a crying or angry woman. And after all, you're the one who picked the show. It's all you've been talking about for 2 weeks now. Have you picked out what dress you're gonna wear? It's after Labor Day, so no white 4-inch heels. Go with the black 5-inch do-me shoes. Maybe Cindy will get excited enough to use the toy. We laughed and went back to work. In the evening, Cindy called. Please, Jace. She's in a very bad place right now. She could use the company of a decent man. But I don't want the company of an emotional woman. She'll behave. I promise. Please, 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 I sighed. Okay, but only because I want to see the show. As a thank you, tell Alan you'll use the toy if he's a good girl. He'll understand. You asshole. Now I'll have to buy the scented stuff on the way home. Cherry, if they have it. We laughed for a minute while I tried to form a mental picture. Alan was 6'4", with a beard. Cindy was probably 5'3". Seriously, man, thanks. If things go bad today, I'll spin you around with this toy. Now get to work. We went to dinner first. Becky was reserved, but not tearful. It was the first time I really looked at her. She was 5'7" tall, slender, with small breasts, but a world-class ass. Her blonde hair fell in soft curls down to her shoulders. She had a well-proportioned face with brown eyes that sparkled almost all the time, and a mouth that seemed to say, "Kiss me, now." All in all, she was very nice. The problem was that she knew it and took advantage of it. I'd seen her work a guy over, and the poor bastard never stood a chance when she turned on her charm. Then she'd laugh and walk away, leaving him hanging. We loved the show. In the parking lot, the girls were singing their favorite song from the show. I looked at Al and grinned. We jumped right in. Soon half the parking lot was singing along to get us to finish. Later we went for a drink at a small club I suggested. I have nothing against dance clubs, but sometimes I like to listen to my thoughts and have a conversation. It was a weekend, and they had a 4-piece band. 2 keyboards, drums, and a guy who switches from guitar to bass depending on the song. It was old, easy tunes, mostly slow. There were a few couples dancing on the small floor. Alan looked at Cindy, and she pulled him to the floor. "I want to..." was all I had time to say before I found myself on the floor with a hot woman wrapped around me. It was slow, it was soft, it was comfortable. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" I asked in surprise. "For showing me that good guys still exist. Cindy told me to behave, and I did. I know you didn't want to come, but I'm glad you made up your mind." "Me too," I said, realizing I meant it. "Whether you know it or not, you're a damn good woman, Becky. Slow down the flirting, invest in someone worthwhile, and I'm sure you'll be very happy. And I'm not criticizing you, just making an observation based on what I've observed of you over the last few years." She smiled. "Thank you, I guess." "Do you really think I'm a nice woman? It's my turn to smile. Whenever you want. Anyway, you have the best ass I've ever seen. Ever notice how, when we're around each other, I'm always a step or two behind you?" She blushed, then slapped my arm. "Thanks again, I think." The song ended and we walked back, talking and smiling. Cindy sat there, amazed. "What were you two talking about?" "Jace says I'm a good woman most of the time. And what a great ass I have." Alan choked on his drink, and Cindy laughed. I looked at him. "What? Don't tell me you never noticed." Cindy looked at him incredulously. "What about my ass, honey?" He was trying to think of something diplomatic when I rescued him. "You don't have a bad ass, Cindy, but it's nowhere near hers. If it's any consolation, you've got a killer rack." Both women looked at me like I was crazy for talking to them like that. Alan started laughing. "That's enough, Jace. Enough while you're on the plus side. You, honey, have a great ass, and you've surpassed Becky in terms of breasts. But I only love you, and that's all that matters to me." Not a bad save, Alan, I thought, remembering what a good salesman he was. Becky just smirked, turned around, and shook her ass in his face. I regretted many times that night that I didn't have my camera. Not wanting to give in, Cindy grabbed my head and shoved my face between her own two, nearly choking me. We all laughed until we cried, had another drink, and danced 3 more dances. In the last dance, Becky snuggled up to me and started rubbing until she felt me tense up. Then she pulled away, smirking. "You're a good guy, Jace, but you're still a man." I got a really good kiss, and she made me promise to call her soon. I haven't called in 2 weeks. That Saturday I got a call from Cindy, and quite abruptly. "You're an asshole." She called me that a lot, and I hoped it was an affectionate expression. She was starting to think there were good guys in the world, and here you are not calling. Her feelings are really hurt. "Cindy," I said quietly when she finally stopped talking. "What?" "What's Alan been up to the last 2 weeks?" "You know exactly what he's been up to. You kept him in the office all those ungodly hours to deal with Jameson's account." "Exactly," I said quietly. "And what have I been doing all this time?" Guillotine Alan because you practically live in the office. What's that? Oh. Yeah, oh. Well, call and tell her now. Tell her that if she's interested, I'll call her next Thursday. Absolutely, absolutely. I wasn't thinking. I thought about my next statement many times later, and it turned out to be correct. Relax, Cindy. She's your friend. Of course you want to protect her. Help her be happy. I understand that. I have to go. She was still talking when I hung up. I called on Thursday and she gushed with joy. We made a date. She wanted to go to a movie and then back to the club she called ours. I suggested dinner. We had a great time. The movie sucked, one of those tasteless tear-jerker movies that some jerk made a fortune writing, but the dinner and dancing were great. By the time we left the bar, she was already firmly under my arm. I surprised her by not coming in when I dropped her off. She looked disappointed until I explained why. I'd love to, dear, but Alan and I are working tomorrow. We're just about at the top of our game. This account and the other one we're taking care of will make us pretty well off, so we're putting everything we have into them. I think the fact that I called her sweetie helped. I received a very hard kiss, followed by another. Eventually, I had to break it off. Damn, do you know how hard it's going to be to work tomorrow remembering those kisses? If I fail this bill, I'm going to make you support me. She giggled sweetly. You're going to do great. If you think that was great, wait until I start the A's game. It wasn't the A's game? Giggles again. No, it was a first date kiss when I really like you. Keep it up, and you'll soon have it all worked out. Now go ahead, conquer the business world. Call me soon. She and Cindy surprised us by showing up the next day and bringing a home-cooked meal. You need to eat, right? She said, floating past me. They set up a conference table, and we ate a feast worthy of a king. Afterward, they cleaned up and packed up. I found her on the conference table, bouncing up and down. What are you doing? Testing the table for strength. I don't want it to break when we baptize it. Cindy laughed and joined her. Yeah, he'll get us through this. Bye, honey. Becky stood up. Yeah, bye, honey. I'll see you this weekend. We'll go to the lake and grill and swim. You guys need some sunshine. As an advertising professional, I know one of the hard and fast rules. Always display your wares at their best, minimizing weaknesses. Both girls had bought new bikinis. Becky was wearing a modest top, but the bottom was not quite a thong. Cindy, on the other hand, had a modest bottom, and the top consisted of 2 postage stamps and some wrapping threads. I still don't know why we weren't kicked out of the park we were in. I think the fact that all the lifeguards and the manager on duty were men had something to do with it. Alan and I almost burned our steaks because we couldn't take our eyes off the girls. Finally, they laughed and put on their slinky covers. We ate. We played in the water. We played volleyball, us against 4 guys. Every time they got ahead in points, Becky would bend over to pick up the ball, or Cindy would jump up and down. We won even though we weren't very good. Just before dark, they pulled us into the water and pressed themselves against us. We were kissing when she pulled away and dove under the water. She surfaced back up, grinning. Cindy did the same. I'm sorry, she said. We got too hot. We pressed against each other and played some more. She held something out to me. I looked down and found something in my hand. She grinned as I rubbed against her thighs, finding nothing. It felt better to the touch than it looked, if that was even possible. She turned slightly and I found something very smooth. She hunched over slightly, and soon I was doing something to her. Faster, she whispered. I turned on the high speed. She passed out and was satisfied. When she calmed down, she slipped her hand into my suit and pulled a similar action. I looked over at Cindy and Alan. She was completely without anything. Her hands were gone too. Honey, will you get me the cover? Aren't you going to put your... She brought her fingers to my lips. No, I'm going to stain your upholstery on the way back. Do you want to complain? Absolutely not. Looks like I need to cover Cindy too. That's her top, isn't it? Behind the security line? Cindy shrieked when she saw this. Becky teased her, telling her that she should come and get her pouch, but Alan only smirked. Finally, she tossed it to her. It was much lighter than Becky's, and it felt like a wet t-shirt when she got out of the water. I heard a sigh and looked back. The 3 teenage boys carrying their gear stood there like deer caught in the headlights. Cindy grinned, reached up and asked Alan for a towel. Without relenting, Becky bent over, showing her lower ass, and handed her the towel. "Good night, boys. Maybe I'll see you next week," they said as they walked to the car. We followed, admiring the view and laughing. That night will remain in my memory for the rest of my life. Even now, when I'm hurt and heartbroken, it is still hard for me to think about it. We almost broke the bed. She seems to go crazy if you do that to her. She could torture you for hours if she wanted to, by the time she was done. I can still feel her muscles massaging me. I'd only done it once before. She didn't like it, and we never did it again. Becky taught me that it was all about preparation and anticipation. The first time we did it, I thought I was going to pass out. Despite everything else, I never had any complaints about it until I found out I was sharing. We were together all the time. Once or twice a week, they would meet us for lunch. One would bring the food, and the other would leave. We found that the conference table was very sturdy, and the couch not so much. We had to replace it after Alan and Cindy had lunch on it on the same day. We were about to move when suddenly there was an obstacle in the road. I always thought it was a warning I should have heeded. We got the second account we wanted so badly. That meant huge hours of work until we could afford to hire someone. I usually worked more than Alan so he could spend time with Cindy. Becky and I hadn't seen each other in 3 weeks. She was a beautiful woman and used to the attention, and she wasn't happy about it. The last 2 phone conversations she'd had, she'd been bitchy, despite my apologies. One Saturday at 5 o'clock, I looked up. Fuck this, I thought. I was going to call her, spend some quality time with her. But she wasn't home. I called Cindy, and she said she thought she was out with friends from work after she berated me for not paying more attention to her. I wasn't in the mood. "All right, if you feel that way. Tell Alan that starting next week he'll work every hour like I do. Is that okay with you?" She tried to back away when I hung up. 40 minutes later, Becky called. "Where are you?" she asked. "I couldn't reach you, so I went back to work. Have a nice evening. I'll call you tomorrow." She was still trying to talk when I hung up. Cindy had ruined my mood, and I wanted to be alone. I was just starting to head back to work when I decided to grab a bite to eat. There was a little diner down the next street from the office that sold killer hot dogs, so I stopped and ate too, piled so high with toppings they were dripping everywhere, as well as a large order of handmade onion rings. After all, I'm not making out with someone today, am I? On my way out, I grabbed a couple mints. I was about to go home when I remembered the club Cindy had told me about. It was like the one we liked, but with a jazz twist. She had read about it in the entertainment section and thought it might be a nice change of scenery. Maybe they'll be there. Anyway, I might look into it. It was a nice place, dim lighting, dark wood, pub-style kitchen, and a nice bar. They had a 3-piece band playing. Drums, piano, bass. They were pretty good, even if I wasn't a big jazz fan. I remember thinking Becky would like it when I heard her laugh. It lifted my spirits. This is where she used to go with her friends. The sly little devil was doing what I was doing, checking up on her. I was headed for the lounge area when she came into view under the arm of some guy I'd never seen before and headed for the dance floor. I didn't care. We were both often asked to dance by others. We danced, but not often. I looked around the floor and didn't see any unmarried girls. I decided to stay back and see what was going on. I took a small table off to the side and watched. There was no one else at the table. They danced 3 more times. The last time, he kept his hand firmly on her ass. The kiss at the end and the one at the table completed the job. I hadn't asked her to be exclusive, but I expected her to be more outspoken if she dated others. I can't deny it was painful. Yes, it did. I chalked it up to a life lesson and started to leave until I remembered the remark about going out with girls. I called the waitress over, asked her to bring them a round of drinks in exactly 5 minutes, and gave her a $20 tip. She had the radar of a good waitress or bartender. "There won't be any problems, will there?" I assured her by telling her I was leaving, that they were my friends and I felt stupid for not noticing them sooner. The drinks were an apology for having to leave and not talking to them. She bought it, sort of. I waited a minute and dialed her number. The group was on break, and I heard the call from where she was sitting. She looked up, said something to her companion, and picked up the phone. "Hey, sweetie, change your mind?" She sounded so sincere. "No, I'm tired. I need to go to sleep. Say hi to the girls for me. Where are you? It sounds awfully quiet." The band is on break, and the girls needed to go to the bathroom. I'm guarding the drinks. A waitress came over with drinks. They looked at me, and I stepped out of the shadows. "Fedora is nice, isn't it? Tell your girlfriend not to go to the ladies' room dressed like that. They might not understand." Her mouth opened and closed several times before she could come to her senses. I was already out the door. I sat in the darkened parking lot across the street and watched her run out the door, looking around wildly. Her companion came out and said something, but she waved him away. The phone rang, and I turned it off. I didn't feel like talking. Her companion argued for a long time, and she kept shaking her head in refusal. Finally, he gave up in disgust and went back inside. I wonder what she was waiting for. 15 minutes later, Cindy pulled up in her SUV. She climbed in and headed toward my apartment. I went the other way. Not being in the mood to stir up drama, I found a motel, paid cash, and passed out for 10 straight hours. When I got home, there was no one in the parking lot, so I showered, changed, and headed outside again. I stopped by the office, but Alan and Cindy were there. I figured Becky was lurking somewhere, so I drove by, went to the mountains for 4 hours, called, and left a message at their house since I knew where they were, and told them I needed a break, and would be back on Tuesday. I slept. I walked in the sun, enjoying it. I ate when I wanted and what I wanted. I even went to the tourist trap and bought everyone gifts. Tuesday morning, I was at the office early in the morning. I parked my car out of sight, and he almost jumped out of his skin when he walked in. He immediately grabbed his cell phone. "Use this and I'll be gone by the end of the week. Understood?" He nodded, watching me warily. "Good. Let's get to work. I feel great. This little break has made a world of difference. I've gotten some good ideas. Tell me what you think." So we worked until lunchtime. He was excited about the new ideas. At lunch, I told him I would see him in an hour and left. I usually ate a sandwich at my desk and continued working. He came back 20 minutes before me. Cindy was there 20 minutes later. She sighed heavily, and I held up my hand. "I'll speak first if you don't mind. Becky owes me nothing but honesty. We didn't talk about being exclusive. I'd hate her, but I'd understand if she said she wanted to date others. But she didn't. And then she lied about who she was with and where she was. That tells me a lot." She started to speak, and I raised my hand again. "I'm not done yet. Tell her not to bother me. I'll call her sometime this week. One more thing. Did you know she had a date? And then you lied to me about it? If I think you did that, it'll affect our friendship. If I can't trust you, you're not my friend. Got it?" She turned slightly pale, and Alan felt uneasy. Then she lied. "I didn't know, or I would have stopped her. I'm mad at her too, Jace. I thought she'd finally grown up. I'm just as disappointed as you are. I kicked her ass for it." "When?" I asked. "What do you mean, when? When did you have time to chew her new ass off?" "That night. She called me from the club in tears. We spent half the night looking for you and waiting for you. Eventually, we went to my house and lay there for hours. You came and went while we slept. Can I at least call her and tell her you're back and you'll talk to her?" I mentally sighed. Maybe she was telling me the truth after all. "Yeah, sure, call her. Now, if you want to keep this house and the tank you drive, you have to let us get back to work." At 6 in the morning, I told Alan I was leaving for the day. "You're kidding, right? We still have a lot of work to do. And it'll all be here tomorrow when we get back. No more killing, at least for a while." I left him with his mouth open. The next day, I placed an ad looking for an assistant. Alan was furious because it was cutting into profits. "Okay," I said. "I'll take the ad down, but if we do, we'll be working hourly from now on. The pay is going away." He didn't like it because he knew I easily worked at least a third as hard as he did, so he shut up. I hired a woman right out of high school. She was very talented, but had no real-world experience. I had to spend a lot of time with her at first, but she developed beautifully. Our business really grew because we were able to work with more people. Ada and I supported ideas, and Alan handled contacts and sales. I called Becky as promised. She didn't know what to say. I waited. "I'm sorry," he finally blurted out. For what? I wasn't going to make it easy. For cheating on you. For going behind your back. I was climbing the walls and I just wanted to get out. I wasn't going to sleep with him. I just needed a companion. I shocked her. I understand, and you didn't make me any promises, but I expected honesty, and you lied like crazy. Tell me, how can I trust you now enough to go back to what we were, or move on? You know I wanted more. I thought you did too. Oh well, the leopard is in place and all that. The remark made her furious. Damn you, you always had it in your head that I couldn't match you, didn't you? I bet you threw your hand out of the socket and got a callus on your tongue, patting yourself on the back and saying, I told you so. I was falling in love, asshole, for the first time in my life. I was scared and lonely, feelings I'd never had to face before. I fucked up. I'm sorry. I said it softly, just above a whisper. I'm sorry too, and I was already in love with you. I hung up when her voice begged me to stay on the line. I haven't spoken to her in 2 weeks. When I did, I wasn't expecting what was said. Do you want to go clubbing on Saturday? Maybe eat at the new Indian restaurant? I was shocked by the anger in her voice. Decided to forgive the poor sinner, eh? Is my penance over? I carefully hung up the phone. I didn't need it. Cindy called me. What did you say to her? Asked her out. Silence. I thought she'd hung up. Oh. What did she say? She didn't say yes, and that's what counts. Good night, CYN. 2 days later, Cindy called me again. I'm with Becky. If I give her the phone, will you talk to her? Yes, if she talks instead of ranting. Let her know that it's getting easier and easier to not talk to her. So if she wants to say something, do it. Without drama or tantrums. Tell her, and then hand her the phone. A few minutes later, I heard a whisper. Jace? Hey, Becky. Jace, I'm so sorry for everything. I wish I could start over as a new person. I want you to see me as a new person, not the person you knew before. Alan wants to grill on Sunday. Will you come? To visit or to grill? She laughed lightly. Alan would burn the concrete if you put it on the grill. Both. I'd like to eat. Prepare the potato salad and the date will happen. I will. Thanks, Jace. So here it is, the conclusion of the first part of our story, the full version of which is already on Patreon. Betrayal, heartbreak, and a lot of confusing emotions. As we've seen, trust is a fragile thing, and once it's broken, it's not easily rebuilt. Jace struggles with the aftermath of Becky's betrayal, torn between forgiveness and moving on. But what lies ahead for our protagonist and his relationship? Will forgiveness win out, or will the scars of betrayal prove too deep? If you're eager to learn more about this story and understand the complexities of human relationships, be sure to subscribe to the channel and give it a like. Until next time, stay tuned and let the twists and turns of life's plots continue to intrigue you.